The bitter wind tore at my uniform as I stared down from the open cargo door, the earth a dizzying mosaic far below. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs, but it wasn't fear. Not yet. It was the icy premonition of betrayal. Below me, on the cargo plane's cold metal floor, Major Davies, my former commanding officer, met my gaze. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, held a chilling, almost triumphant glint. He gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod to the two armed men standing behind me. A cold dread seeped into my bones. Then, a sharp, brutal shove. My feet left the floor. The world inverted. The roar of the engines faded, replaced by the violent shriek of the wind rushing past my ears. I was falling. The plane, a metallic behemoth moments ago, rapidly shrank above me, its lights twinkling like malevolent stars. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that I had no parachute. As I tumbled through the frigid air, Davies's voice echoed in my mind, a chilling whisper from moments before the push. "You saw too much, Alex. This is how we handle loose ends." His words were calm, devoid of any emotion, a clinical pronouncement of my termination. He hadn't bothered to raise his voice, hadn't even hinted at anger. Just a cold, hard statement of fact. I didn't scream. There was no point. My training, years of pushing my body and mind to their absolute limits, kicked in. For a fleeting second, my eyes squeezed shut. Then they snapped open, focusing. The ground, an indifferent, unforgiving expanse, was rushing up to meet me with terrifying speed. Every muscle in my body tensed, preparing for an impact that should have been unsurvivable. They thought I was just a problem. They forgot I was a SEAL. The ground slammed into me. The world exploded into a cacophony of pain and darkness. For a second, everything went black. Then, a faint sound, the rustling of leaves, the distant murmur of the wind, began to penetrate the ringing in my ears. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. I grew up in a small town in rural Ohio, nestled near the shores of Lake Erie, one of the vast Great Lakes. Life there was simple, predictable, and deeply rooted in community. My dad worked long, honest hours at the local manufacturing plant, his hands always calloused, his back often aching. My mom, a beacon of patience and wisdom, taught English at the high school, shaping young minds with stories and grammar. Our days were structured around the rhythms of the seasons, the school year, and the comforting predictability of small-town life. Everyone knew everyone, and a helping hand was never far away. We spent our summers playing football in dusty fields, the scent of freshly cut grass mingling with the humid air. Weekends often found us fishing in Lake Erie, the vast expanse of water a constant reminder of something bigger than ourselves. There was a strong, quiet sense of patriotism woven into the fabric of our town. We honored our veterans, celebrated national holidays with earnest pride, and believed deeply in the values passed down through generations: loyalty, honesty, integrity, and the unwavering belief in serving your country. These weren't just abstract concepts. They were the principles we lived by, instilled in us from childhood. After high school, the path for many of my friends led to the local plant or a nearby college. But for me, the call was different. My grandfather, a quiet, stoic man, had served with distinction in World War II, his faded uniform an almost sacred relic in our family home. His stories, told in hushed tones, ignited a spark within me. I wanted to push myself, to test my limits, to be part of something bigger than myself, just as he had been. That's why I joined the Navy. It was during the grueling crucible of SEAL training that I first encountered Major Davies. He wasn't a major then, of course, but a senior instructor, already a legend in his own right. Davies was a force of nature, known for his relentless intensity, his unyielding demands, and an almost obsessive focus on mission success. He pushed us harder than we thought possible, stripped away every ounce of weakness, and forged us into something new, something tougher. Initially, I respected that intensity. It was what I had come for, after all. I admired his unwavering dedication, his refusal to accept anything less than perfection. He embodied the ruthless efficiency I believed was necessary to be the best. But even then, subtle cracks began to appear in that polished facade. I recall small instances, easily dismissed at the time as just Davies being Davies, where his ruthlessness bordered on the excessive. He would push recruits beyond what seemed necessary, making questionable calls during training exercises that left us all uneasy. I remember one particular desert exercise where Davies, for a minor infraction, cut off a trainee's water supply for several hours, stating with cold conviction, "Weakness gets you killed." It felt excessive, even cruel, a step too far. Yet, caught in the relentless grind of training, I never spoke up. We were taught to follow orders, to trust our superiors, and to endure. I chalked it up to his unique, albeit brutal method of forging elite warriors. I grew up in a small town in rural Ohio, nestled near the shores of Lake Erie, one of the vast Great Lakes. Life there was simple, predictable, and deeply rooted in community. My dad worked long, honest hours at the local manufacturing plant, his hands always calloused, his back often aching. My mom, a beacon of patience and wisdom, taught English at the high school, shaping young minds with stories and grammar. Our days were structured around the rhythms of the seasons, the school year, and the comforting predictability of small-town life. Everyone knew everyone, and a helping hand was never far away. We spent our summers playing football in dusty fields, the scent of freshly cut grass mingling with the humid air. Weekends often found us fishing in Lake Erie, the vast expanse of water, a constant reminder of something bigger than ourselves. There was a strong, quiet sense of patriotism woven into the fabric of our town. We honored our veterans, celebrated national holidays with earnest pride, and believed deeply in the values passed down through generations: loyalty, honesty, integrity, and the unwavering belief in serving your country. These weren't just abstract concepts. They were the principles we lived by, instilled in us from childhood. After high school, the path for many of my friends led to the local plant or a nearby college. But for me, the call was different. My grandfather, a quiet, stoic man, had served with distinction in War II. His faded uniform, an almost sacred relic in our family home. His stories, told in hushed tones, ignited a spark within me. I wanted to push myself, to test my limits, to be part of something bigger than myself, just as he had been. That's why I joined the Navy. It was during the grueling crucible of SEAL training that I first encountered Major Davies. He wasn't a major then, of course, but a senior instructor, already a legend in his own right. Davies was a force of nature, known for his relentless intensity, his unyielding demands, and an almost obsessive focus on mission success. He pushed us harder than we thought possible, stripped away every ounce of weakness, and forged us into something new, something tougher. Initially, I respected that intensity. It was what I had come for, after all. I admired his unwavering dedication, his refusal to accept anything less than perfection. He embodied the ruthless efficiency I believed was necessary to be the best. But even then, subtle cracks began to appear in that polished facade. I recall small instances, easily dismissed at the time as just Davies being Davies, where his ruthlessness bordered on the excessive. He would push recruits beyond what seemed necessary, making questionable calls during training exercises that left us all uneasy. I remember one particular desert exercise where Davies, for a minor infraction, cut off a trainee's water supply for several hours, stating with cold conviction, "Weakness gets you killed." It felt excessive, even cruel, a step too far. Yet, caught in the relentless grind of training, I never spoke up. We were taught to follow orders, to trust our superiors, and to endure. I chalked it up to his unique, albeit brutal, method of forging elite warriors. He had a way of looking at us, not as individuals with strengths and weaknesses, but as interchangeable cogs in a machine designed for warfare. It was effective, no doubt, in creating formidable operators, but it also stripped away a layer of humanity. There was one time, during a particularly brutal cold water immersion drill, when a fellow recruit began to show signs of hypothermia. The medic was signaling to pull him, but Davies waved him off, his face a mask of stone. "He'll learn to fight the cold, or he'll wash out," he'd said, his voice flat. The recruit eventually recovered, but the incident left a bitter taste in my mouth. It felt less like training and more like deliberate endangerment. Another memory surfaces, from a simulated hostage rescue scenario. Davies was observing from a tactical oversight position. My team had meticulously planned our entry, ensuring minimal collateral damage. But at the last moment, Davies overrode our plan, ordering a more aggressive, less precise breach that resulted in significant simulated casualties among the hostages. When questioned by another instructor, Davies simply shrugged. "Sacrifices are made for the greater good. Better to learn it here than in the field." His pragmatism was absolute, almost terrifying in its lack of empathy. These were not isolated incidents. They were threads in a growing pattern, small but persistent indications that Major Davies operated on a different moral compass than the one I had been raised with. He valued mission success above all else, often at the expense of his men's well-being, or even their lives. The values of loyalty, honesty, and integrity that had been so deeply ingrained in me in that small Ohio town seemed to hold a little sway in Davies's world. His focus was singular, unyielding, and increasingly unsettling. I tried to reconcile the man I initially respected with the man who seemed to disregard human cost so casually. The dissonance grew with each passing week, a quiet alarm, bell ringing in the back of my mind. But in the hierarchical structure of the Navy, especially within the SEALs, questioning a senior officer, particularly one as revered and feared as Davies, was simply not done. So I watched, I learned, and I filed away these observations, not yet understanding the full implications of the man I was serving under. My first deployment to Afghanistan under Major Davies's command was a brutal awakening. Initially, the bond within our unit was unbreakable, forged in the crucible of combat. We were a tight-knit team, relying on each other for survival, and Davies, in those early days, seemed to be the unwavering anchor. The adrenaline, the shared danger, the sheer intensity of our missions, it all created a powerful, almost primal connection. We fought hard, we won, and I believed we were doing good, driven by common purpose. But as the deployment stacked up, the veneer began to crack, revealing a darker side to Davies's command. I started noticing a pattern of behavior that was not only demoralizing, but actively destructive to morale and trust. Davies had an uncanny knack for taking credit for my team's most challenging successes, often presenting our hard-won victories as his own strategic brilliance. It was a subtle erosion of recognition, a constant feeling of being overlooked despite our sacrifices. Worse still, he would publicly reprimand me for minor issues, often things completely beyond my control, using these moments to assert his dominance and undermine my authority in front of the very men I led. I remember one particularly galling incident. My team had executed a daring rescue mission, extracting a group of trapped civilians from a hostile zone under heavy fire. It was textbook, flawless. Davies had promised me a commendation, a recognition of the bravery and precision involved. I genuinely believed he would follow through, but weeks later, the commendation was awarded to another officer, a desk jockey who had played a peripheral role at best. When I confronted Davies, he merely offered a dismissive wave of his hand. "You don't need the paper, Alex. You know what you did." It felt like a slap in the face, a deliberate humiliation designed to remind me of my place in his hierarchy. It wasn't about the medal itself. It was about the blatant disregard for integrity and the public undermining of my efforts. The stories grew darker, the instances of his abusive and negligent behavior becoming more pronounced. On a critical mission to neutralize a high-value target, Davies made a snap call that defied our intelligence, pushing us into an ambush that we barely escaped. 2 of my men were injured, 1 seriously. When I later challenged his decision, pointing out the clear intelligence that contradicted his order, he simply shrugged. "Casualties happen, Alex. Mission first." His words hung in the air, cold and devoid of any genuine concern for the men who had bled for his impulsive command. It was then that a chilling realization began to dawn on me. Davies valued his own ambition, his own perception of success, far above the lives and well-being of the soldiers under his command. He saw us not as people, but as expendable assets in his personal game of career advancement. This was not a sudden revelation, but a slow, insidious buildup of resentment and distrust. The initial respect I had held for Davies, born from his intensity and perceived competence, curdled into a deep-seated suspicion. I started keeping a mental log of his questionable actions, not just for my own sanity, but for the safety of my unit. Every dubious order, every instance of credit theft, every casual dismissal of risk to my men, it all piled up. I found myself scrutinizing his every command, looking for the ulterior motive, the hidden agenda. A knot of unease became a permanent fixture in my stomach every time Davies gave an order. My loyalty to him, once absolute, withered and died, replaced by a growing conviction that he was a danger, not just to our missions, but to the very men he was sworn to protect. The camaraderie that had once defined our unit began to fray, replaced by a pervasive sense of anxiety and a quiet, unspoken understanding among the men that Davies was not to be fully trusted. We were professionals. We would follow orders, but the trust, the vital component of any effective fighting force, was gone. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that something had to change. The line was finally crossed during our deployment to a remote, politically unstable region in South America. Our mission was officially counter-narcotics, but as we delved deeper into the jungle, tracking a notorious cartel, we stumbled upon something far more sinister. It wasn't just drugs. It was a sophisticated, clandestine operation involving illegal arms dealing, a black market pipeline funneling military-grade weaponry to rogue factions and terrorist groups. The implications were staggering, reaching far beyond the murky world of local crime. As we meticulously gathered intelligence, piecing together fragments of encrypted communications and hidden manifests. A horrifying truth began to emerge. The operation wasn't just being tolerated by corrupt local officials. It was being actively facilitated by elements within our own ranks. My team uncovered hard evidence, irrefutable documents, and encrypted ledgers that connected high-ranking individuals to this illicit trade. And at the very heart of it, clear as day, was the name of Major Davies. He wasn't just aware of it. He was a key player, orchestrating deals, providing cover, and profiting immensely from the bloodshed these weapons would inevitably cause. The man I once respected, then grew to distrust, was now undeniably a traitor, a criminal who had betrayed everything we, as soldiers, stood for. The discovery hit me like a physical blow. All those small instances of his ruthlessness, his disregard for human life, his obsession with power and personal gain, they suddenly coalesced into a monstrous, coherent picture. This wasn't just about arrogance or poor leadership. It was about profound corruption and treason. I knew I couldn't ignore it. The oath I took, the values ingrained in me from that small Ohio town, demanded action. I confronted Davies privately, choosing a secluded corner of our makeshift base, away from prying eyes and listening ears. I laid out the evidence, the undeniable proof I had painstakingly collected. My voice was low, strained, but firm. I appealed to the man I once thought he was, to the shared military values that were supposed to bind us. "Major," I said, my gaze fixed on his, "this goes against everything we stand for. This isn't just about breaking protocol. It's about betraying our country, our uniform, and every soldier who's ever fought for what's right. You need to fix this. You need to come clean." I genuinely hoped, perhaps naively, that some vestige of honor remained within him, that he would see the gravity of his actions and choose redemption. But Davies merely looked at the documents, his expression unreadable for a moment, before a slow, contemptuous smile spread across his face. He leaned back, a chilling laugh escaping his lips. "You think you understand how the world works, Alex?" he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "You think it's all black and white, good versus evil, like some comic book? Some rules are meant to be broken, my naive seal, and you, with your quaint notions of honor, are in way over your head." His eyes, cold and reptilian, narrowed. "You really think you can expose me? Do you have any idea the power I wield, the connections I have?" Then his tone shifted, becoming softer, more menacing, a venomous whisper that sent a shiver down my spine. "Your parents are getting on, aren't they? Still living in that quiet little town in Ohio? Be a shame if something disrupted their peaceful retirement. A house fire, perhaps? Or a tragic accident on the lake. Life is fragile, Alex, especially for those without protection." It wasn't a direct threat, not explicitly, but the message was clear, chillingly so. He wasn't just dismissing me. He was threatening my family, the very people I had sworn to protect. In that moment, any last flicker of hope I had for Davies, any shred of the respect I once held, was extinguished. He was beyond redemption. He was a monster, and he had now made it personal. I knew then that going through official channels was not an option. Davies had too many connections, too much influence. He would bury the evidence, discredit me, and ensure that I, or worse, my family, paid the ultimate price. He had underestimated me, though. He had forgotten who I was, what I was capable of. The fear that initially gripped me quickly transformed into a cold, burning resolve. My life was now undeniably on the line, but so was the integrity of everything I believed in. I would not let him win. I decided, then and there, that I would gather more undeniable proof that even Davies couldn't suppress, and then I would bring him down. Not for revenge, but for justice. And I would do it on my own terms, in my own way, no matter the cost. Alex, now officially discharged from the Navy under a cloud of fabricated suspicion, orchestrated by Davies, vanished. He didn't simply leave, he went deep underground, meticulously orchestrating his disappearance. He shed his identity, his routines, and every traceable link to his former life. His SEAL training, once honed for combat and rescue, was now repurposed for a singular, clandestine mission: surveillance, evasion, and the relentless pursuit of information. He was a ghost, moving through the shadows, his every action calculated and precise. For months, Alex dedicated himself to building an ironclad case against Davies. He knew that simply having evidence wasn't enough. He needed an overwhelming, undeniable mountain of proof that could withstand Davies's immense power and influence. He became a master of intelligence gathering, patiently tracking Davies's movements, intercepting his encrypted communications, and piecing together the intricate web of his illicit network. He leveraged old contacts from his military days, men and women he trusted implicitly, who owed him favors or shared his quiet discontent with the rot they saw in the system. He even tapped into a network of independent hackers, individuals with a moral compass sharper than their public image, who helped him decrypt secure channels and access hidden databases. His life was a constant state of vigilance. He lived off the grid, constantly changing locations, never staying in one place long enough to establish a pattern. Abandoned cabins, remote safe houses, even the occasional anonymous motel room served as his temporary bases. Every shadow held a potential threat, every unfamiliar face a possible danger. He learned to sleep with one eye open, his senses acutely aware of his surroundings, always looking over his shoulder, always ready to disappear at a moment's notice. The constant pressure was immense, but the image of his family, safe in Ohio, fueled his resolve. He wasn't just fighting for justice. He was fighting for their future, for the peace he hoped they would never lose. Alex understood that merely presenting his accumulated evidence would be insufficient. Davies would simply bury it, spin a counter-narrative, or use his connections to discredit Alex entirely. He needed a public, undeniable exposure, a moment where Davies would be caught red-handed, his crimes laid bare for the world to see. He envisioned a trap, a meticulously constructed scenario that would force Davies into the open and leave him no escape. He planned to leak the information to a trusted, fearless investigative journalist he had quietly cultivated over the past few months, but not until Davies was in his most vulnerable position, completely unaware that the net was closing in. The suspense built with each passing week. Alex learned through his network that Davies was planning a major transaction, a deal of unprecedented scale, in the same remote South American region where Alex had first uncovered the initial evidence of corruption. This new transaction involved a significant shipment of weaponry, an astronomical sum of money, and a high-value target for Davies. A powerful cartel leader he was looking to bring into his fold. Alex recognized this as his opportunity, the perfect stage for his trap. He meticulously arranged for a third party, an untraceable intermediary, to tip off Davies about Alex's supposed presence in the area. The message was carefully crafted to make it seem as though Alex was attempting to interfere with Davies's upcoming deal, a desperate, misguided attempt to disrupt his operation. This was the bait designed to play directly into Davies's arrogance and his deep-seated desire to eliminate any loose ends, particularly Alex. Alex knew Davis's impulsive nature, his belief in his own invincibility. He anticipated that Davies, seeing Alex as a direct threat to his lucrative operation and his freedom, would act rashly, attempting to silence him once and for all. He meticulously calculated that Davies would try to eliminate him during the very flight carrying the illicit goods. Ensuring Alex's disappearance would be attributed to an accident or a failed escape attempt. The cargo plane, the remote location, the certainty of Davies's presence. It all aligned perfectly with Alex's plan. He was ready. The roar of the engines filled the cargo plane as Alex, seemingly resigned, was led by two of Davies' burly men. His hands were bound, his face grim, a perfect picture of a defeated man. Major Davies stood a few feet away, a triumphant, smug expression plastered across his face. The flickering fluorescent lights of the plane cast long, dancing shadows, adding to the theatricality of the moment. He approached Alex, his voice cutting through the engine noise with chilling clarity. "Any last words, Alex? This is the end of your little crusade. A tragic accident, they'll call it. No parachute, no witnesses, just another loose end tied up." Alex met his gaze, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, but he remained silent, playing his part to perfection. Then, with a rough shove, Alex was propelled towards the open cargo ramp. The wind screamed past, a deafening tempest attempting to rip him from the plane's interior. He was falling, just as Davies intended, just as Alex had planned. But this wasn't a desperate, uncontrolled plunge into oblivion. This was a calculated, meticulously rehearsed maneuver. His body, trained for years in precision and control, executed a controlled freefall. He wasn't just dropping, he was positioning himself, orienting his body, preparing for the next crucial step. Davies, still watching from the gaping maw of the cargo bay, expected to see Alex's body plummet, a small, insignificant dot against the vast expanse of the earth below. He anticipated the satisfaction of seeing his problem vanish. But then, something unexpected happened. A small dark shape separated from Alex's falling form, unfurling rapidly. It was the wingsuit, custom-built, low-profile, perfectly concealed beneath his clothes. It wasn't a traditional parachute, designed for a slow, gentle descent. This was a tool for speed, for evasion, for controlled flight. Alex deployed it with practiced ease, his body transforming from a falling object into a gliding projectile, moving away from the plane with surprising velocity. Back on the plane, Davies's triumphant smirk dissolved into a mask of utter disbelief. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, widened, a vein throbbing visibly in his temple. He squinted, trying to reconcile what he saw with what he expected to see. The small shape, the way Alex was no longer just falling but moving horizontally, rapidly distancing himself from the aircraft. The realization dawned on him, slowly at first, then with a gut-wrenching force. "He knew," Davies roared, his voice laced with a mixture of shock, rage, and a dawning terror. "He knew. He played me." He slammed his fist against the plane's interior, the sound lost in the engine's drone. His carefully constructed plan, his absolute certainty of victory, had unraveled before his very eyes. The hunter had become the hunted, and he had walked directly into Alex's trap. Meanwhile, far below, Alex executed a flawless controlled landing in a pre-planned location, a dense patch of jungle canopy that absorbed the shock of his descent. Bruised, but remarkably intact, he quickly shed the wingsuit and the minimal emergency chute that had cushioned his final approach. The moment his feet touched the earth, a secure satellite signal, pre-programmed and waiting for this exact trigger, was activated. The comprehensive dossier he had painstakingly compiled, detailing every single one of Davies's crimes, every illicit transaction, every corrupt connection, began its journey. It was automatically uploaded and simultaneously dispatched to multiple international news agencies, the ones known for their integrity and fearlessness, and to several highly respected international law enforcement bodies. The evidence was now out, irrefutable, undeniable, and beyond Davies's reach. As the data transmission completed, Alex pulled out a small, unassuming flip phone, a relic from an earlier era, untraceable and unhackable. He dialed quickly, the number memorized. It was the investigative journalist he had meticulously cultivated, the one he trusted to break the story without fear or favor. "Check your inbox," Alex said, his voice low and steady, a hint of hard-won satisfaction in his tone. He didn't wait for a reply, simply ended the call, severing the connection. He looked up at the sky, where the cargo plane was now a distant, vanishing speck carrying Davies, unaware of the storm that was about to break. He then texted one final word to a secure, anonymous contact, a message confirming that the mission was accomplished. Done. Major Davies's descent into disgrace was swift and absolute. Before the cargo plane had even reached its final destination, the initial reports began to surface, first as whispers in the intelligence community, then as a torrent of undeniable evidence flooding news desks worldwide. The comprehensive dossier Alex had compiled, meticulously detailing every illicit transaction, every corrupt connection, and every abuse of power, proved to be an unassailable indictment. Davies was arrested shortly after landing, his face a mask of bewildered fury, as military police swarmed the tarmac. The international media, fueled by Alex's anonymous leaks, had a field day. The scandal ripped through the highest echelons of the military and government, exposing a vast, insidious network of corruption that had festered for years. Davies faced a swift and brutal court-martial. The evidence was overwhelming, leaving no room for doubt or defense. His once illustrious career, his carefully constructed reputation, and his very freedom were irrevocably shattered. He was sentenced to a long, ignominious prison sentence, stripped of all honors, his name becoming synonymous with betrayal and greed. Alex, meanwhile, vanished once more, allowing the dust to settle, the global outrage to subside, and the ripples of his actions to fade into the background. He didn't seek accolades or recognition. His objective had never been personal glory, but justice. After several months of living off the grid, constantly moving, he eventually found his way to a quiet, remote town, nestled deep in the rugged mountains of Montana. The vast, untamed wilderness offered him the anonymity and peace he so desperately craved. Here, far from the shadows of his past, he started a new life, a new identity. He opened a small business, leveraging his innate mechanical aptitude and his deep understanding of outdoor survival gear. He began designing and building custom outdoor equipment, durable packs, innovative shelters, and specialized tools for adventurers and survivalists. His hands, once trained for combat, now found purpose in creation, in crafting items that brought safety and reliability to others. His life in Montana was a stark contrast to the relentless intensity of his past. He lived a peaceful, unassuming existence in a small rustic cabin, surrounded by the towering pines and the crisp, clean air of the mountains. His only constant companion was a loyal, scruffy terrier mix he'd rescued, a creature as independent and resilient as Alex himself. He found a quiet satisfaction in his work, in the simple rhythm of crafting with his hands, in the honest labor that brought tangible results. The constant vigilance that had been his companion for so long slowly began to recede, replaced by a sense of calm and security he hadn't known in years. Alex often reflected on his extraordinary journey, his escape from the plane, his long fight for justice. He understood the profound importance of standing up for what was right, even when the odds seemed insurmountable, even when it meant facing down powerful, corrupt forces that seemed untouchable. He often thought about the meaning of true strength, realizing it wasn't just about physical prowess or combat skills, but about an unwavering moral compass, about resilience in the face of adversity, and about the intelligence to navigate complex, dangerous situations. He never sought revenge against Davies. His motivation was purely justice. He wanted to dismantle the corrupt system Davies represented, to prevent others from suffering the same fate. In the solitude of his cabin, with the crackling fire as his only witness, Alex finally found peace. He had rebuilt his life from the ground up, forging a new path defined by integrity and purpose. Occasionally, a nondescript envelope would arrive in his remote mailbox, containing an anonymous letter. These were usually from former colleagues, military personnel who had been quietly aware of Davies's corruption but powerless to act. The letters, always brief, always unsigned, offered words of thanks, hinting that Alex's actions had indeed changed things for the better within the military, sparking investigations and reforms that had cleaned out other pockets of corruption. These small acknowledgments, more than any medal or commendation, brought him a deep sense of quiet satisfaction. He had fought a lonely battle, endured unimaginable risks, but in the end, he had prevailed. He was a survivor, a silent hero, and finally, after years of relentless fighting, he was truly free.